So nanti bila Aira dah start present, saya akan mute saya punya mikrofon so that dia tak ada, apa nak kata, dia gema yang macam tadi tu tak dengar lah. Okay, alright ya. Sekejap. Alright. Okay. So, okay ya. Semasa presentation ni berjalan, untuk ahli-ahli kelas 3 Solaris yang lain, okay, observe their presentation and cuba reflect balik jika ada yang sama dengan kamu punya content. Mungkin kamu boleh reflect dari segi apa yang sama dengan apa yang berbeza dengan kamu punya content. Dan jika ada perbezaan, feel free to ask the members of the group kenapa ada kamu punya finding berbeza dengan dengan mereka punya finding ya. Okey, itu satu. Nombor dua, selepas nak kata apa ya, untuk mereka, untuk group yang dah set formative question ke quiz ke untuk bagi pada kawan-kawan, make sure tak lebih daripada duration yang kita dah tetapkan ya. Okay, take it away Aira and Tin. Thank you so much. You can start now.
Okay, Assalamualaikum and good morning. Today my friends Alisha, Dura, Salma, Najia and I will be presenting about the definition of space weather and its effects on Earth. So we'll be starting off with the definition.
So, our planet is orbiting a violently raging star, releasing millions of tons of material every second, thus creating the ever-changing conditions in space, known as space weather. So, space weather is the phenomena that occur on the surface of the sun, such as solar flares, prominences, sunspots, and coronal mass ejections, and also occur in space, such as solar wind, solar radiation storm, and geomagnetic storm.
Now we proceed to the effects of space weather. I'll start with the formation of aurora. So, aurora is a natural phenomenon caused by the reaction of solar wind and the Earth's atmosphere. As we have learned before, the particles that erupted from the sun will travel around the space, and once they reach the Earth, some of the particles will get deflected by the Earth's magnetic field, and some will flow along the lines until it reaches the upper atmosphere. So, once they reach the top, this is where the formation of aurora will take place. The electrons will collide with particles of gases such as oxygen and nitrogen, creating a spectacular beautiful light. And now I'll pass to Aira.
So the next thing is disturbances to telecommunication. So the heating of the upper atmosphere, which is caused by space weather, will cause the atmosphere to expand. And this expanded atmosphere is denser at higher altitudes. So this greater density will put a drag on orbiting satellites. And this might cause TVs to stop functioning, the internet will stop working, and mobile phone services will start failing. Other than that, geomagnetic storms disturb the ionosphere. This makes the shortwave radio communication, which is typically used by the military, spotty and sometimes impossible.
Next is navigation system. It is a device that has the capability of knowing your current position and let you determine your destination. Today's navigation systems use global positioning satellites, which is GPS. In these systems, the measurements of wheel and compass sensors were combined to determine a sequence of positions. In turn, was compared to a map database. An example of disturbances in satellite navigation services is Galileo, which is similar like satellite. Due to space weather, it affects on the upper atmosphere. This in turn can affect aviation, road transport, shipping, and any other activities that depend on precise positioning.
Lastly, I'm going to talk about electrical lines. Space weather disturbance cause geomagnetic field variations that generate electric currents into power transmission system on the ground. These geomagnetically induce current flows to and from the ground through the windings of power transformers and cause partial rotation of the transformer core. The effects to this are damaged transformer through spot heating, widespread blackouts, disruption of power lines, and increased vulnerability of power system, making them more vulnerable to outside disturbances. Did you know that a great magnetic storm happened on 13 March 1989, causing a 9-hour blackout of the Hydro-Quebec electric power system?
Okay, so that's pretty much the end of our presentation. But to really wrap things up, we prepared 4 questions for you to answer, which is just stating whether the following statements are true or false. So you can just type in the chat for the answers. So the first question, statement, Galileo is not similar to a satellite. So is that true or is that false? Okay, so I can see some answers in the chat already. So the answer is false because Galileo is a global navigation satellite system that actually has a higher accuracy than GPS. Therefore, the answer is in fact false. So next sentence. TVs can't function if satellites stop working. Is that true or is that false? Okay, so yes, most of the answers in the chat is correct. Without satellites, we won't have much choice in our television programs because there wouldn't be any more direct-to-home broadcasting. So yes, it is true. Third question, space weather is a phenomenon that occur on the surface of the sun only. So for this statement, it is true that space weather occur on the surface of the sun, but it also occurs in space. So this is in fact false. And the last statement is blackouts may occur when electrical power lines are affected. So is that true or is that false? You may type in the chat. Okay. So the last one is true because when there's failure in the power network, the system redistribute the power flow. And if not treated, the overload lines or transformers will be removed, which may cause a series of chain reactions resulting in power grid blackout. So it is true. That's pretty much all from us. I hope you guys learned something new. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, I would like to remind you that you have exceeded around 2 minutes plus here for your presentation. So dia dah jadi macam 5 minutes 44 seconds macam tu lah. So I would like to remind to other groups to take note of the time taken for your presentation, ya. Alright. Next is apa ya? Okay, next is Raja Nur Alisha. Can you share your screen?
Okay.
Alright. Rajaan Nur Alisha group berapa ya? Oh, tiba-tiba ada answers. Okay, sekejap saya mute.
Teacher, can you hear me?
Yes, very clear.
Okay, I'll start, okay? Good morning, teacher and my fellow classmates. Today, Patricia, Alicia, Amrina, Nervin, and myself will be discussing information on the definition of space weather and its effects on Earth. The definition of space weather. Space weather describes the variation in the space environment between the Sun and Earth. In particular, space weather describes the phenomena that impact systems and technologies in the orbit and on Earth. Space weather can occur anywhere from the surface of the Sun to the surface of the Earth. As a space weather storm leaves the Sun, it passes through the corona and into the solar wind. When it reaches Earth, it energizes Earth's magnetosphere and accelerates electrons and protons down to Earth's magnetic field lines, where they collide with the atmosphere and in ionosphere, particularly at high latitudes.
Okay, hi. So next I will be explaining about the aurora phenomenon. So as we all know, the sun's core can reach up to 15 million degrees Celsius, which will cause the surface of the sun to boil, and also the plasma particles inside of the sun to move around rapidly. Eventually, the plasma particles will be able to escape the sun through the sunspots and get sent through space to planets in our solar system, including Earth. And when they get sent through space, it can also be known as the solar wind. And when the solar wind finally reaches our planet Earth, our magnetic fields will be able to attract the solar wind toward the north and south pole. So when you see aurora in the north, it is known as aurora borealis, but when you see it in the south, it's called aurora australis. But people usually witness aurora borealis because it is not easily because Antarctica is not easily accessible to most people. So here are some of the North Pole countries where you can visit to watch aurora firsthand. So we've got Sweden, Norway, Finland, Northern Canada, and Northern Alaska. And lastly, how are the colors created? It is created when the solar wind goes through our magnetic shield and collides with oxygen or nitrogen in our atmosphere. When it collides with oxygen, it will produce a yellow or green color. Meanwhile, if it collides with nitrogen, it will produce a red, violet, or blue color. And that's all. I will be passing it on to Rajin or Alicia. Thank you.
Okay, so the disturbance in telecommunications network are typically caused by power supply of network devices, cable damages of connections, and technical problems in the network. Now I'll be passing to Marina to discuss about navigation system.
Alright, so navigation system. What is a navigation system? A navigation system is a set of equipment designed to assist or automate navigation in a vehicle, ship, or aircraft. How does a navigation system incorporate itself in our daily life? We use a navigation system when using Waze to get to our desired location and also helps pilots navigate the direction of the destination and the distance from the airplane. Lastly, we also use it when ordering food online to place our addresses online of choice. That's all for me. Thank you. I'll be passing on to Nervin.
Electrical power lines. How does the space weather affect it? Space weather can produce electromagnetic fields that induce extreme currents in wires, disrupting power lines and even causing widespread blackouts. Space weather disturbances cause geomagnetic field variations that induce electric currents into power transmission systems on the ground. These geomagnetically induced currents, GIC, flow to ground through the windings of power transformers where they produce extra magnetic flux that can saturate the transformer core. That's it from me.
Now we will be discussing the quizzes. The first question today is: space weather is defined as the phenomena that occurs on the surface of the blank. What do you think is the answer? And the answer is correct. It is sun.
And the second question is, aurora that occurs in the South Pole is known as? Yes, that is correct. Aurora australis.
The third question is, List one disturbance to telecommunication.
Okay, tolong summarize terus sebab dah lebih 3 minit.
Okay, the answer is any of the one below this is considered correct.
Okay, kita
Okay,
skip.
so does the
Sorry, tolong
it's
skip
okay.
semua soalan-soalan ni, terus summarize your presentation sebab dah 4 minit.
Alright.
So that's it from us. Thank you.
Okay, ingatkan ada summary panjang-panjang. Alright, thank you. Thank you to the group. Thank you to Raja Nur Alisha and team. There is another good presentation from another tapi tadi I would like to point out that you are exceeded 4 minutes ya, ada extra 4 minutes kat situ dah dan mengganggu pula lah timing orang lain ya. So for other groups, please take note to ensure that your presentation is within the time limit that we have agreed upon before this ya. Alright, the next one is siapa ya? Awani ya. Silakan Awani share screen dan boleh terus mula.
Okay, Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to my beloved teacher and my fellow friends. Before I begin the presentation, I would like to welcome my group members Awani, Aina, Adnin and Juzaila. Without further ado, I'm going to start our presentation that has been prepared by us. As you guys can see on the screen, our topic for today is about space weather and its effect on Earth. Firstly, what is space weather? Space weather describes the variation in the space environment between the Sun and Earth. When it reaches Earth, it energizes Earth's magnetosphere and accelerates electrons and protons down to Earth's magnetic field lines where they collide with the atmosphere and ionosphere, particularly at high latitudes. Everyone is familiar with changes in the weather on Earth, but weather also occurs in space. This solar wind, along with other solar events like giant explosion called coronal mass ejections, influences the very nature of space and can interact with the magnetic system of Earth and other worlds.
There are many types of solar weather. Solar activities associated with space weather can be occurs on the surface of the Sun, such as solar flares, coronal mass ejection, prominences, and sunspot, and in the space, such as solar wind, solar radiation storms, and geomagnetic storm. Aurora. Aurora is a mystical and romantic name that means dawn in Latin, and aurora also refers to a natural light display in the Earth's skies called the aurora polaris, or polar lights. These disturbances alter the trajectories of charged particles in the magnetospheric plasma, result of disturbances in the magnetosphere caused by solar wind. Auroras are only visible at night and usually only appears in lower polar regions. Aurora are visible almost every night near the Arctic and Antarctic circles.
Next, space weather effects on Earth. Space weather effects on ground can include damage and disruptions to power distribution networks, increased pipeline corrosions, and degradations of radio communications. Commercial airlines may also experience damage to aircraft electronics and increased radiation doses to crews at long-haul aircraft altitudes during large space weather events. This is also an effects such as destructions of infrastructure, threatens astronauts on board, it can disable GPS services, can cause electrical blackouts on Earth, and also it can damage satellite.
Next, space weather effects on humans. Leukemia is cancer of the body's blood-forming tissues including the bone marrow and the lymphatic system. Cancer. Cancer is a group of diseases involving abnormal cell growth with the potential to invade or spread to other parts of the body.
Okay, quick time. Okay. I'm sorry if it's a bit noisy as I am upset right now, but okay. Question number one. Space weather occurs on the surface of the. Can anyone answer this? Alright, correct. Fine. Yes. Okay, question number two. What are the phenomena occurs on the sun's surface? Can anyone answer that? Oh, yes. Correct. Alright. So that's all from us. Thank you for listening.
Alright, thank you so much. Group ni, okay, setakat ni when comparing time management, group ni dia ada dia extra 30 seconds je. Okay, okay, barely apa? Barely there. Dia apa 3 minutes 30 seconds. Okay, quite good time management. Alright, so the next one is, I think is Navdeep's turn, kan? Navdeep, silakan.
Alright, teacher. Can you see the slide, teacher?
Can.
Okay, we'll start now.
Assalamualaikum and very good morning to Teacher Nadra and fellow friends. Today we are going to my team and I are going to present about our foundation on the effects of space weather towards Earth. Before starting, I want to give a brief summary of what we are going to discuss throughout this presentation. We are going to discuss about the effects in various aspects such as to humans, towards Earth, and so on.
Space weather. Space weather is changes that occur in the environment near Earth. It is caused by the occurrence of on the sun's surface, which includes phenomena such as coronal mass ejection and solar wind.
Okay, so now the effects on human. Space weather can cause leukemia, cancer, and anterior wall myocardial infarction. Leukemia is a cancer of the blood and bone marrow, sorry. Cancer is a disease which some parts of the body cells grow uncontrollably, and anterior wall myocardial infarction is usually when the tissue tears and suffers injury due to lack of blood supply. This can usually cause mortality and occurs usually in the inferior wall.
Effects to Earth. Space weather effects on ground and include damage and disruption to the power distribution networks, increased pipeline corrosion, and degradation of radio communication. Second, space weather can produce electromagnetic fields that include extreme current in wires, disrupting power lines and even causing widespread blackouts.
Effects to electric distribution. Strong solar storm can cause changes of electrical currents in space and energize electrons and protons trapped in Earth's varying magnetic field. This geomagnetically induced current flow through ground through the winding of power transformers where they produce electromagnetic change that can saturate the transformer's core. Other than that, coronal mass ejection can cause geomagnetic storm at Earth and induce extra currents in the ground that can degrade power of grid operation. Lastly but not least, the electric power grid and conse- consequently the power to your home and business can be disrupted by space weather.
Okay, so one of the effect to geomagnetic field is that space weather can cause a variation that induce electric currents into power transmission systems on the ground.
And lastly, oh sorry, And lastly, space weather could possibly disrupt our telecommunication system. Solar energy particles from the occurrence of the process on the sun can penetrate satellite and electronics and cause electrical failure. Not just that, it not only it affect the technology itself, but there will also be a disturbance to radio wave transmission. As well as we already know, our Earth has multiple atmospheric layers. One of the layers that would be affected is the thermosphere, or mainly known as ionosphere, as there are presence of ions here. Ions would reflect radio waves from satellites usually, but the effect is minor or undetectable. However, when there is presence of foreign plasmatic particles in this area layer, it will cause the rate of deflection or maybe the absorption of radio wave increase due to increased density of the ions that cause distortion of wave. As the transmission of radio wave is disturbed, many telecommunication systems will face difficulties. For example, it can cause loss of signal or GPS, which may lead to loss of control of air traffic control.
Okay, wait, sorry. Okay, let's see some of the questions now. What is one of the many effects to humans when exposed to space weather? You guys can answer in the chat. I can't really see the chat, so Jeffrey, can you help see the chat?
Mostly answered B.
Okay, the answer is B. Thank you. Next question. All are the effects of space weather towards Earth except Jeffrey, can you help read the answer?
Mostly answered C.
Okay. C is the correct answer. And last but not least, we have a true or false question. In the telecommunications sector, loss of signal may occur when exposed to space weather.
And they answered true.
Yes, the answer is true. If you guys have any questions, you can put it in the chat box and we will try to answer them. If not, that's it from us. Thank you for paying attention. Bye.
Everyone.
Seriously Isyad nak tanya font apa ya? Isyad memang suka font ya? Okay, tak apa. Okay, untuk anak-anak, if you can see, oh sorry. Tadi group tadi terambil extra 3 minit ya. Just to inform you. So saya lupa nak bagi tahu. If you can see in the chat box area, dia ada satu lagi button yang tajuk dia activities. So pada button activities tu, I think all of you can access Q&A. Then you can post your questions there also lah. So I will turn on the Q&A. And then you can post your question there. Tujuan untuk submit based on Q&A ialah all the questions tu, when you post the question, it will be in a separate list. So kalau soalan tu belum lagi dijawab, kita akan address the questions lah. Kalau kita post question tu dalam messages saja, question tu akan naik ke atas dan kalau tak perasan memang tak terjawab ya. Okay, so saya dah buka allow question. For example, apa Ishak dah post, dia tulis like this. So apa dia akan keluar dekat saya, dia akan keluar sebagai separate list lah. Kejap. Okay. So lepas tu for example Ishak dah post like this. So dia macam kalau ada yang ramai nak tanya soalan yang sama, kita boleh upvote soalan tu so that it can be apa most popular question atau FAQ yang kena dijawab lah. Okay. So boleh tulis dekat Q&A tu, if you can access it, tulis dekat situ jugalah kalau nak tanya pada group-group. For example, I would like to ask group 6 pasal ni, atau I would like to ask group 5 pasal ni, atau I would like to ask Jeffrey what is it, apa-apa dan sebagainya. Macam Ishak nak kata, I would like to ask Jeffrey's group what font did you use, for example boleh tulis dekat situ. Alright, last final group, Aiman Syamil, silakan. Silakan share screen. Mana kau orangnya?
Sekejap teacher, sekejap.
Oh, okay. Alright. Kalau tak boleh buka, saya boleh bukakan ya sebab the link you have given me the link ya.
Teacher bukakan lah untuk kita orang. So senang sikit untuk kita orang.
Kalau nak cakap next bagi tahu Sekejap Okay, let me share. Okay, this one kan? Sekejap saya share. Okay. Okay, silakan.
Assalamualaikum and good morning to teacher and my fellow friends. Today, Aiman, Lud and I will be talking about space weather.
Okay, teacher, next. What is the definition of space weather and its effect on Earth? Space weather describes the variations in the space environment between the Sun and the Earth. In particular, space weather describes the phenomena that impact systems and technologies in orbit and on Earth. Space weather can occur anywhere from the surface of the Sun to the surface of Earth. As a space weather storm leaves the Sun, it passes through the corona and into the solar wind. When it reaches Earth, it energizes Earth's magnetosphere and accelerates electrons and protons down to Earth's magnetic field lines where they collide with the atmosphere and ionosphere. Particularly at higher latitudes, each component of space weather impacts a different technology. Okay, teacher, next. The effect of space weather on Earth. The aurora. Aurora is the light show after the storm in space. Aurora often appears in highly structured ribbons, sheets as thin as a few hundred meters that can stretch for hundreds of kilometers into the atmosphere. These sheets ripple and move across the sky as the aurora evolves, driven by changes in the shape Earth's magnetic field in the tail of the magnetosphere hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. The magnetosphere is shaped a bit like a raindrop with the white rounded end, the bow toward the Sun, and the thin extended tail away from the Sun. Each magnetic pulse and the thin sheets we see on Earth can be traced back through space to where the magnetic tail is energized and stretched by interaction with solar wind and the interplanetary magnetic field. Earth magnetic field lines converge at the geomagnetic north and south poles, which are offsets from the geographic poles. Magnetospheric electrons can be accelerated by various processes and are lost to the atmosphere as they flow along magnetic field lines in the polar regions toward the Earth. There they collide with oxygen and nitrogen atoms in Earth's upper atmosphere. From this iteration, aurora light is emitted. Although aurora light appear most frequently near the poles, the aurora borealis to the north and the aurora australis to the south, space weather happens on a much larger scale. Solar matter can be flung past our position 93 million miles from the sun and can reach the remotest edges of our solar system. These eruptions carry as much energy as a modern nuclear reactor could produce if it ran continuously for hundreds of thousands of years. When these powerful surges arrive at Earth, they reshape our magnetosphere. The magnetosphere is the region of space surrounding Earth where the dominant magnetic field is the magnetic field of Earth rather than the magnetic field of interplanetary space. Electrically conductive plasmas in the solar wind and the magnetosphere are not free to cross one another. So when the solar winds hit the magnetosphere, they don't flow through our magnetic bubble but must go around. The force of the wind as it impacts and flows around the magnetosphere affects the shape of the magnetosphere. The shape and size of Earth's magnetic field continually change as field is buffeted by solar wind.
The disturbances to telecommunication. Different types of space weather can affect different technologies at Earth. Solar flares can produce strong X-rays that degrade or block high-frequency radio waves used for radio communication during events known as radio blackout storms. Solar energetic particles, energetic protons, can penetrate satellite electronics and cause electrical failure. These energetic particles also block radio communication at high latitudes and during solar radiation storms.
The disturbance to navigation system. There are several ways in which space weather impacts navigation systems such as the GPS. GPS radio signals travel from the satellite to the receiver on the ground, passing through the Earth's ionosphere. The charged plasma of the ionosphere bends the path of the GPS radio signal similar to the way a lens bends the path of light. In the absence of space weather, GPS system compensate for the average or quiet ionosphere, using a model to calculate its effect on the accuracy of the positioning information. But when the ionosphere is disturbed by a space weather event, the models are no longer accurate and the receivers are unable to calculate an accurate position based on the satellites overhead. Next, teacher. The disturbance to electrical power lines. Extreme space weather could potentially cause damage to critical infrastructure, especially the electric grid, highlighting the importance of being prepared. Space weather can produce electromagnetic fields that induce extreme currents in wires, disrupting power lines and even causing widespread blackouts. Several space weather also produces solar energetic particles, which can damage satellites used for commercial communication, global positioning, intelligence gathering, and weather forecasting.
So that's all from us. Kita orang lupa nak add quiz. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Apa tadi presentation tadi extra dekat extra 3 minutes jugalah. Alright. So thank you so much for all of your presentation sebab masa kita pun dah limited. Sebenarnya kita ada lagi satu group yang belum present. I will set a different time for that particular group so that they can present to you guys also lah. So here is a few comments for each of the groups. In general, secara umumnya most of the group time management kurang sikit ya. Yang terbaik setakat ni group awal ni lah sebab extra 30 second je. Tapi most of you need to work on your time management skill. Okay, nombor 1. Nombor 2, overall, I would like to congratulate all of you for a good presentation. I can see that most of you have used a good combination of font, of color and also layout. So kita boleh nampak lah dekat mana main points, dekat and then the pictures that you use also help your presentation lah, help to describe your presentation better, which greatly help to increase audience understanding. Sekejap ya. So untuk bila saya go through group by group ya, untuk group Aira, Zafrin tadi, your presenters are talking too fast. Saya pun macam dia cakap pasal apa ni? Saya pun macam kena ni sikit lah. Tapi mungkin sebab kamu nak jaga masa. But it is good that you have simple questions yang pasal true or false questions tu very good. Cepat kita boleh dapat maklumat daripada audience. Untuk grup Raja Nur Alisha pula, I can see that you also have a good combination of layout and font size, and banyak juga slide yang kamu gunakan, presentation dia very simple, which is good for easy for the eyes. Cuma mungkin saya perasan kamu punya explanation pasal Aurora tu panjang sangat, menyebabkan effects yang lain tu presentation dia jadi pendek sebab kamu nak jaga masa kan. So mungkin dari segi itulah kamu bagi attention pada Aurora tu banyak sangat. Okay. Kemudian untuk group Awani and friends, cerita pasal solar weather tu banyak sangat. Okay, cerita pasal solar weather tu banyak sangat menyebabkan dia ganggu main point of the presentation, iaitu effects lah. Effects of solar weather tu dia jadi kamu jadi explain dalam bentuk yang lebih simple. Tapi sebenarnya bagus explain pada lebih simple tu. Cuma dekat explanation dekat solar weather tu kalau boleh limitkan lagi. Macam tu lah. Kalau tak mesti kamu boleh ngam-ngam dapat 3 minit sebenarnya. Termasuk masa buat soalan tu. Okay, untuk group Nafdi and friends, okay, kamu tadi extra 3 minutes. It's good that you also simplified your presentation, dan saya melihat untuk group-group yang simplify, yang buat layout untuk different points of your presentation ni, most of the presenter guna ayat sendiri untuk explain, which is very good because when you understand the content baru kamu boleh explain guna ayat sendiri kan. So that is very good lah. Cuma nanti cuba check untuk group Nafdi ni ada part yang font dia tak konsisten, ada part yang font dia semua capital letters, tapi the second point jadi semua small letters, macam tu lah, benda-benda minor macam tu lah. Cuma dia jadi bila audience baca, dia jadi inconsistency tu boleh mengganggu attention audience jugalah. Mungkin audience yang cerewet macam saya je kot, yang lain okey kot. Untuk group Aiman Syamil, your presentation kan very lengthy. So saya kalau bila saya cuba buka dekat telefon, saya struggle nak baca jugalah. So bila kita buat presentation anak-anak, especially online presentation, we have to take into account that some of our audience may be using smaller device macam telefon ke kan. So it is good that many of you decided to put points, important points susun dalam petak-petak, dan points yang sama satu color, points yang sedikit berbeza color yang lain. That is good. Itu semua adalah visual cues to highlight important points of your presentation. Kalau kamu nak bercakap dalam bentuk ayat tu, sebenarnya Canva ni dia ada presentation view lah, tapi ini lebih kepada kalau ada satu presenter sajalah. Itu nombor 1. Dan nombor 2, kalau kamu perasan Canva dia ada Canva live. So nanti kamu boleh explore function ni semasa kamu buat presentation live tu. Kamu boleh collect, kamu boleh buat soalan dan audience boleh respon pada slide tu. Lebih kurang macam kita buat dengan pendek lah. Diorang, kita boleh minta audience masuk ke dalam presentation kita, kita bagi code dan audience boleh respon dekat situ. Tapi itu for the next time lah. Dan satu lagi saya perasan ada group dia pakai Canva free version. Nanti saya akan bagi link. Kalau kamu register Canva under saya, dia akan jadi semua pro version features tu kan. You can access it sebab saya punya macam mana Canva bagi cikgu MOE punya account boleh add students under dia so that you can access the Canva Pro features ya. So I would like to say thank you so much. You have done a very good job dan memang saya perasan kalau guna Canva ni kamu punya font lagi kemas, kamu punya layout lagi kemas dan lagi colourful and you also make a good use of different diagrams to further explain your points lah, which is very good ya. So nanti next week by Friday saya mungkin akan come up with the overall berapa TP yang kamu dapat untuk setiap group dan macam biasalah saya akan bagi personally the commentary tu pada ketua group untuk ketua group share pada anak buah ya. So that is all for today. Nanti pada Telegram saya akan bagi the Google form for your attendance for today ya. So thank you so much. Congratulations to all. Alright, you're welcome. Okay, so that is all for today. Thank you so much. Sekian wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum. Good morning.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you, teacher. Bye.
Thank you,
Thank you, teacher. Stay safe.
Thank you.